You've just entered the law offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. If you've come for actual legal advice, you need to turn right around, honey. You need to get out of here, 'cause you ain't gonna get none of that. They quibble, and they squabble, and they bicker. But if you want to hear meaningless opinions, this is the right place. They got plenty of that. Stuff that makes no sense at all. They go off on tangents. It's crazy talk. If that's your thing, keep listening. They'll keep talking.
Oh no no, oh no no, it's another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. You've entered the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. Yay!
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker on this March 24th, 2021. We have an incredibly special guest for you guys here tonight. Unexpected. He is a true captain of industry. This is the chairman of the board and CEO for Allied Artists International. And he is going to be talking to us about whatever he wants to, because we can only bow to him. And he will be helping us as a guest fake attorney with our client, Dead Rockers, Where Are They Now? Sometime later on in the episode, if we don't get sidetracked too much on his particular life. So that being the case, I'll start things off. This is going to be kind of a random question. One of the things I did find out about you is that you had been knighted by the Order of Constantine the Great. So technically you are Sir Kim Richards. And I'm wondering, has that allowed you to start your own round table or obviously you have a page or a squire getting you your drink.
Well, first of all, I want to let you know that I'm pretty sure that what is it? Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker has represented me on a number of occasions.
We get around to us, right? Yeah, we have lots of affiliates.
That's right.
We got OJ off.
I was knighted. That, by the way, that it's by the Dutch royal family.
Oh, okay.
And so I was knighted by the Dutch royal family. And as I said at the time, I said, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but never sir.
I feel what was your service to their government that they knighted you? What?
No, it was for philanthropy that I had been involved in. The Clinton organization, or the Clinton, I can't remember the exact name of it, but for various humanitarian projects I've been involved in over the years.
Right. The Clinton Foundation, the big one they have, right?
Yeah, it is. I guess it is called the Clinton Foundation.
I think that's what it's called. I think.
Yeah. I used to be able to rattle it off like that, but I haven't dealt with it in a while.
Yeah, that was.
But it wasn't just that. I've done a lot with the cancer research and things of that nature.
Yeah, because that was around 12 years ago. So I know that I have difficulty remembering things from that long ago too.
12 minutes ago, I had trouble.
I was going to say I'm struggling to remember lunch. I'm on the East Coast, by the way.
So somehow you got wrangled into appearing on our podcast. They would greatly appreciate this. Could you give us some background, like what part of the country are you from? How did you grow up? How did you wind up eventually being in this position? Because you've been in the position, like I said, for like 30 years. So something led to that. I know that you were involved in the production of Pink Floyd's The Wall at some point, but what, if you don't mind, taking us through that journey for a bit?
Okay. Well, I grew up first of all, I'm right from here in Los Angeles. And I grew up, if you're familiar, are any of you from Los Angeles?
I lived there for a time. In Glendale, actually.
I lived in Glendale as a child.
Yeah.
I got mugged in Glendale.
Anyway. Well, I can't think of a better place to get mugged. But
just stating for the record, it was not me that mugged him. We were in Glendale at the same time, but I wasn't.
It wasn't, but it's a great story. We'll get into that sometime.
Yeah. Well, is anybody familiar with the Greek theater?
Was that Orpheum?
No.
No, the Greek theater is a place in Griffith Park that is a very famous theater. If you're familiar with Neil Diamond, Hot August Night, it was recorded there. Carole King recorded her live album there. And it's at the time that the time frame I'm talking about was 1969 through the mid 70s. And now, before that, when I was about 4 years old, my family lived on the hill just above the Greek Theater. And I would listen to the music coming from the Greek Theater. It was people like Nat King Cole, Judy Garland, Keely Smith, artists of that era. And the Greek Theater is located in a place called Vermont Canyon, and the music would radiate through the canyon, and I could hear it every night from my home. So as a 4 or 5 year old, I would sit on this wall just listening to the music, and it intrigued me. I really liked it. It was something about it that drew me to it, sort of like the Pied Piper. And when I was 13 years old, I ventured down the hill to the Greek Theater, and I walked up and said, what can I do to work here? They looked at me at 13 and they said, nothing. Maybe you could be an usher. I said, well, does an usher get to stay in during the show? Yes. I said, then I want to do it. So I got, I don't know if you can call it hired, because they didn't pay us in cash. They gave us these little tear off things that you get, so many of you get a free ticket. Well, I didn't need a free ticket. I was there every night. So I would give the tickets to my friends. And I used to use my ability to get into the facility as an usher to hang out with the sound guys. The sound guy.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you must have heard a tremendous amount of artists at the time. Is there a one in particular that stands out as like that affected you the most?
Wow, there were so many.
Yeah.
I was there for Hot August Night.
Okay.
For the recording of Hot August Night, and I later. The funny thing is that all of the people that were involved with Neil Diamond, such as his publicist Norman Winter, and the man who really discovered him, Russ Reagan, and really broke him and Elton John and Olivia Newton-John. Russ Reagan later became a very, very good friend and a business associate. And so, but anyway, so I started working at the Greek Theater as an usher, but I started hanging out with the sound guys. Eventually, the sound guys thought I guess they thought I had potential. They went to the usher, the fellow who ran the ushers, and said, "Hey, can you leave him on the usher so he can get in, but can he work with us?" And I wasn't supposed to, but that was how I got involved with in music.
And how old were you at the time when they kind of sort of brought you into the fold at
that was the first year, so it's about 13.
Wow.
Wow. You were like a little apprentice.
Nice break. That's cool.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine being able to sit up there as a kid and listen to it, and obviously that had a huge impact on you. I think anyone with a soul would have an impact on.
Well, because I was with the sound guys, I was able to go anywhere I wanted within the facility.
Oh, cool.
And I learned an awful lot I learned everything from them about sound and electronics. He might have even been the lighting engineer, but he took me down and he showed me, if anybody's familiar with electronics, what a relay is. You can, it's basically an electromagnet. You energize electromagnet and it causes the contacts to make contact. And so you can take high voltage electrical items, and with low voltage, you can control them from a distance.
I think they put one of those in my head when I was brought back to life.
Well, that sounds like another story.
I have the remote control right here, man. Hold on.
Yeah. Which one is Quibble?
Matt.
Well,
Oh, okay.
I get accused of that, but we don't represent the names in any way. Those are long dead partners. So
Well, anyway, that's sort of what started my career, because the sound guys took me really into their group, and they allowed me to learn sound through them, and eventually. And I was there for a number of seasons. At that time, the Greek Theater only had seasons during the summer, and the acts would be there for an entire week as opposed to a night or two, the way it is now. But anyway, if the opening act, for instance, didn't have a sound man, the engineers that worked for the Greek Theater would be their sound engineer. And they started letting me learn to mix with those initially just for sound checks, and then eventually they let me actually mix. Well, one of the opening acts didn't have their own sound man. They were letting me mix, and I just loved the act. I just thought this act, I was hearing things that were amazing to me. And so I wasn't really mixing for the audience. I was mixing for me. I was mixing to hear what I wanted to hear in music. And at the end of the week, I was putting some mics up backstage, and one of the band members walked up to me and said, let me see if I get this straight. I'm told you mixed for us. I mean, at that time I was probably 15.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I did. And he says, well, we're being told that it was the best sound we've had ever.
That's
wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I said, well, great, thank you. And he says, what do you do during the school year? I looked at him and said, go to school. He says, well, we're going to be opening, we're going to be like the house band at a local place called the Sopwith Camel. Nobody'd ever heard of it because it was brand new.
Wasn't that Snoopy's name for his doghouse?
Well, yes, but it came.
Flew.
The actual Sopwith Camel was an actual plane from, I guess, World War II or something.
Yeah.
And there was a replica of it inside this theater. Well, yeah, they asked me to mix for them, and I said I would love to. And I was so young that I could not stay in the club unless I was working. When I wasn't working, I had to literally leave and go stand out in the parking lot because I was too young to be in where they served alcohol.
So if you had to go to the restroom, you had to literally go out to the alley to use it, and then they'd let you go back.
I believe they let me use the restroom, but they were fairly liberal on that. I stayed in as long as I looked like I was doing something. Nobody bothered me.
So I'm curious, what's the big reveal? What's the name of the band? Who are these guys? Am I cutting to the chase too quick?
How did you? It's great. I don't know how you figured that out, but it was Steely Dan.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Steely Dan and the ones that you at the age of 15. Holy crap.
But I didn't get to do that very long at the Sopwith Camel because they had a hit. And they came to me and said, hey, look, we're not going to be playing here anymore. But they said, there's a tour that would like to hook you up with, if you're interested, going through Australia. And I said, yes, I'll do it. They said, we haven't even told you who it is. Doesn't matter. I want to go to Australia.
So is it both Walter Becker and Donald Fagen who came to you, or
no? So Donald Fagen.
It was Fagen.
Donald
Okay,
Fagen.
wow.
Okay.
Yeah. But so anyhow, it turned out that the act going through Australia was the Bay City Rollers, and the Bay City Rollers, which wasn't exactly my cup of tea, although I got along with them and really liked them. I became pretty good friends with Leslie McEwen. And there, the opening act for the Bay City Rollers was a young chap by the name of Andy Gibb.
Oh, wow.
And nobody knew who he was. I certainly did not know who he was. He and I became friends. And then I got to work with Andy when he came to the US.
Well, I hope the Bee Gees knew who he was.
They did.
Some family members. So wow, so Steely Dan takes you to Australia, and Australia you connect with Andy Gibb. So did you like tour back to the U.S. with Andy Gibb, or you were back here and then he came and then you were there for him?
No, I was actually just mixing monitors on the Australian tour with the Bay City Rollers, but I was the youngest member of the entire of anybody there, and the only person there that was a little younger than me was Andy Gibb, and I have a suspicion that he had a question about a microphone, and I think he looked at the sound guys and he said, "Okay, Methuselah." And said, okay, well, there's somebody that looks almost my age. And he came to me and asked me, and then we became friends that way.
Wow. So now we're talking, you're maybe 17, 18 at this point?
Yeah. Oh, I may have been 17. I can't, back in those days, you could fly around without as much identification as you require now, but not to Australia. So I maybe I was 18.
His age changed when he was in Australia anyway.
Well, that's because it goes backwards, the water.
Yeah,
right.
the toilet.
Yeah.
When you cross the international date line, you lose 5 years.
Yeah.
I need to get on that right now. I'm gonna book
Heading
a
on
flight.
a boat. So you came back from that tour, and then did you go back into the Greek theater or the Sopwith Camel, or?
Well, I never worked again at the Sopwith Camel.
Right.
That just the one time. But when I came back from that tour, I started working with small artists here and there, and I then got asked to work for RSO Records because Andy was being brought to the United States, and I was able to be a personal assistant to Andy, and at the same time do some sound work with him.
So that was okay. So it was with RSO, and so this would have been around what, mid 75, 76?
No, it was a little later than that. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like 77, 78.
Got it. And so that was like right at the cusp of Andy Gibb's burgeoning career.
Well, this was before.
Oh,
Okay,
so
he had actually released an album. Well, I guess it was a single in Australia that didn't do as well as he did here. And Barry went to to Robert Stigwood and said, I think it's time we bring Andy in. And so that's why they decided to bring him from Australia.
Got it.
What was Robert Stigwood like? He seemed like a larger than life character, that guy.
Well, we referred to him as Stiggy. And Stiggy was a very interesting combination because on one hand, he was not easy to deal with, but on the other, he really had foresight. He was able to see potential in artists. So it was a combination. It was very hard. And he had, I of course was very good friends with Andy, and Andy ended up sideways with Stiggy. So, and I never found Stiggy to be particularly gracious. He was.
I feel like you're being really diplomatic right now.
Yeah.
Yes, you're allowed to use all language here, whatever of multiple kinds, whatever you choose. This is a free, open area for you to speak your mind of whoever.
Well, I don't want to downplay Stiggy's importance because he really was great at spotting talent and developing it and promoting it, particularly at the time. None of the methods he used then would work today, but they did work then very well. And of course, he was, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Bob Stigwood merged with Brian Epstein, and so NIMS came into the Stigwood organization, and so at one time he actually managed the Beatles.
Oh wow!
Wow.
It would be briefly.
It was briefly. It was brief, but it was after Brian Epstein passed.
Right.
If you don't mind indulging me, Kim, did you have anything to do with any of the production on the Times Square album, the movie that Robert Stigwood produced in 1980?
No.
Okay.
No, by 1980, I was working for CBS Records.
Yeah, I was going to ask what was the next door that opened for you that kind of led to your emerging career?
Well, CBS offered me. I wanted to stay with Andy. I really, Andy was just a great guy, and yes, he had some issues that we all know about now, but he was just a terrific guy, and I really wanted to hang with him. But I wasn't. There was a fellow who, which is a completely different story, who was partners with Stiggy by the name of Robert Fitzpatrick. Now, he had been an attorney for the Beatles, which is undoubtedly how he met Stigwood. And he had been working there, and he was, in essence, who I reported to. And I really liked Robert Fitzpatrick. Well, he had left, and I had an offer to go over to CBS and to work on Pink Floyd's, what we thought was going to be Pink Floyd's last album. And I just couldn't pass that up.
Are you talking about The Wall?
The Wall.
Yeah. It was almost, some people would possibly call that their last album. I would disagree, but I know that there's a lot of controversy regarding that particular one in terms of how it moved into the breaking up of Pink Floyd. But
well, actually, after The Wall, there was an album called The Final Cut, which was supposed to be the final cut.
Yes.
And but the only one that was final for was Roger.
Yeah. Well, I think it's mainly because it seemed more like a solo album to the other members of Pink Floyd. And I think that was, as was a large part of The Wall. Anyway, this is trivia that it's out there for anybody else to read, and I don't need to indulge my own.
What was your position on The Wall? Were you the main engineer? Were you the?
He would like stand up with his elbow against it, Greg. That was his position.
I was excellent at getting coffee, but no, I was like first of all, they have the term second engineer, and second engineer means anybody that isn't the first. And so in an album like The Wall, well, first of all, they would record at very strange hours, and they wouldn't necessarily record. They usually didn't record together. So you would have David recording at one time during the day, and then you'd have Roger recording at another time. And David would record something, and then Roger would come in and try to delete it. And so that would go on for a while.
So you had to be a traffic cop, basically.
Well, and then the engineers didn't. The engineers, a lot of the engineers, for the most part, sided with David, because David was very, when it came to actually performing the music and technically with a guitar, David is the master. And so if Roger would say, I want something corrected, just delete it, tell him to do it again, we would essentially delete a blank track. And then and tell him it was deleted, then tell David, and he'd go in and he'd make some minor change. Then that night they would tell Roger, say, David went in and did exactly what you said. He'd listen to it, says, now it sounds great.
So does Roger know that this happened? Is he aware?
He may know now. Well,
we'll get him.
I'm not the only one to have revealed this.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure.
I'm going to tell people that I'm one of the second engineers on Pink Floyd The Wall. Since I wasn't the first engineer, anyone who wasn't is a second engineer. That could be me.
You're a listening engineer, is what you were. So that's like late 70s as well. So you're still pretty young at that stage, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So now I did read
that was 80-81, by the way.
That you have over 100 gold, platinum, and diamond selling records under your belt.
Well, the diamond is The Wall. That's the only diamond I have.
Got it.
And it's for The Wall.
Okay, and that is as second engineer.
Yes.
Okay. Do you guys, as engineers, do you get like little epaulets on your shoulders so you can determine?
Those little campaign bars, like in the military, maybe.
They get a train conductor's hat.
Well, getting a diamond record is pretty good.
Yeah,
it looks very nice on your wall.
Well, I meant the sound engineers, military.
Hall of Fame.
Right, exactly. If there's some way to distinguish between the different, like whenever you get promoted, so somebody knows. Because the fact of the matter is that the sound engineers are some of the biggest unsung heroes in the music business.
Yeah.
They do so much work that hardly anybody outside of the music business knows that they do to make people sound really, really good. And most major musicians can't do without them. So there, I feel like there somehow needs to become more recognition for. I don't know how that would work unless you get like your own reality show or something.
Yeah.
But
Kim, did you ever? Oh,
I was going to
gonna
follow up with the earlier question regarding the records on the wall. So obviously the wall is the crowning achievement since it hit diamond. What would you say would be the one that you had the most of your fingerprints on, that did the best, that you're most proud of all those accolades?
Well, let's see. I was also an engineer on again a second on Queen's The Game album.
Oh, that's a
which
big one.
wow,
yeah,
love that album.
and the but most of the my real interest is in developing artists. So working with Andy Gibb, watching him go from I was with him for the first two singles, which were off of his first album, and actually it's first three singles, because it was first in the second album. He's the only artist, the only male artist in history to have three #1 back-to-backs, but they were off of two albums. So he had the first two off the first album, and the third one came off of, which was Shadow Dancing, came off the second album, but they were still back-to-back because they were singles.
And you were the second engineer or first
No,
engineer?
I was working with him in
Okay.
developing in his development then. I mean, I was there for some of the engineering, but I wasn't actually I wasn't fingers on the well, we call them faders now, but some of the studios back then were actually volume controls,
Oh,
Or like knobs.
right? Actual knobs.
or potentiometers.
That's correct. In fact, that's technically you're very even though a volume control is a potentiometer, the original in the real quality studios back then, the potentiometers were about this big, and
Yeah.
you would dial them like that, and there would maybe be 10.
Yeah, I got to
You only
apologize
had-
to our audience for going sound nerd on them. So Andy, I'm assuming you maintained your friendship with Andy Gibb throughout the rest of his life.
Yes.
So so at that stage, I think you said you wound up with CBS Records. So where did you then go from there?
Well, I was put on loan. There was a TV show called Fridays that went on. You remember that show? Okay.
I do. I
I
would.
actually used to watch that show. That's where Michael Richards came from, and
Mhm.
Yes,
Gilbert
no
Gottfried.
relation.
yeah. Well, Gottfried was on Saturday Night Live, but
Well, I think he was on Fridays first, but they had great music on Fridays. They had better bands on Fridays than Saturday Night Live. They had all the more obscure, cooler bands, I remember, on Fridays.
I think
Well,
they were a
when
little
you
edgier
listen-
than
yeah.
Saturday Night Live at the time too.
That was our whole thing. Well, first of all, there's a couple of things people don't know about Fridays, or they don't today. Is Fridays was ABC's version of Saturday Night Live, but the difference was it was from Los Angeles. We broadcast from the Talmadge and Prospect studios, which at that time was the Los Angeles affiliate studios of KABC, and it was owned. So part of that lot was run by ABC TV, and the other part was KABC Studios. And we had our stage was there for Fridays. We broadcast live to the East Coast, and then came back and broadcast again live to the West Coast. So it was actually two shows we did each week.
Wow. I didn't know
Live
that.
shows.
Two live
And
shows. Back
two
to
live
back.
shows, and then they would take the two shows and edit together the best of both shows for reruns.
Oh, interesting.
But that's what was the end of the show. We actually we were canceled. We were canceled, and we were number 1 in our time slot, and we were only like number 2 in overall for music programming. But it cost so much for the show that it was cheaper to cancel the show.
Oh, so it was canceled just purely for financial reasons.
100%, because
Wow.
it was the up and coming. We had all of the young acts. For instance, the first time you hear the Stray Cats in the United States was on Fridays, and I did all the sound for it.
Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that. I mean, maybe I did, but I don't remember it. Wow, that's cool.
You sure?
Yeah, I remember seeing the Clash on Fridays. The Clash way before Combat Rock, when they just had done London Calling.
We
That
had
was a
every
revelation.
Andy used to hang out there. It was I've got pictures of him wearing a Fridays t-shirt because they loved having him wearing a t-shirt. And he never was on the show, but he used to hang out on the set because he would come over there. Because we were recording on Fridays, after we got done, we'd go out and he used to love hamburgers. And there used to be a place called All American Burger, which was Andy's favorite. And it was open 24/7. So if he was bored, he'd come over to the studio after we were done with the show. Then we would go, we'd go out to All American Burger together.
Nice. So what toppings did you get on the burger?
I'm trying to remember what he got, but I think it was just ketchup and typical cheese, and he loved cheeseburgers.
So there's
I mean,
heard hamburgers say that he had to like dip the thing in mustard or anything. So okay.
Matt, we promised the publicist we wouldn't throw him any hardball questions.
I was just gonna say,
Make
Matt,
it easy on him.
Am I getting too controversial?
It was called All American Burger. It wasn't called Southwest Burger or
but he's Australian, Brendan.
Asian fusion burger. But he was going to All American Burger.
Right.
So he was looking for the All American.
He could have asked for like a slice of dingo on it. We don't know.
I don't think dingo is. I don't think that they do that.
I'm pretty sure that his only interest in All American Burger was the burger.
Yeah,
probably.
He's just eating the burger itself, just plain, no bun, no ketchup, no lettuce.
So did you engineer all of the musical acts that came on Fridays? Was that basically your job?
Not in their albums, but on the live show. I did.
Yeah.
Well, we had several sound engineers, but I was the main sound engineer at that point.
So you're mixing the sound live. That's kind of I think heart attack creating, I would think, on 2 live shows.
I really enjoyed it. And the reason I enjoyed it is because, first of all, when you're mixing live, you're in a control room. You're not actually doing it like at the Greek theater. You have a console that's in the Greek theater was kind of a pain because it was all the way in the back, and it was so you had to compensate a little bit because the sound you were hearing was a little delayed from the stage, and you weren't hearing what the front half of the house was hearing. So you had to go and listen to what it was sound like there, so you'd understand what you were doing was affecting the front. But live engineering in a live theater is different than on television. On television, it's more like you're mixing a record, and you hear things and you want to hear it the way the audience in the television land is hearing it. And so I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was fairly easy.
I got it. So it doesn't have to sound good to the people in the audience, like the live audience. It doesn't sound good for the people at home. We
would pipe it into the audience, and if it was sounding good going home, it would sound pretty good in the audience.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you know what you were doing. I would hope so anyway. Otherwise, I would have given you the job. All right, and so from Fridays, so that would have been sometime in the early 80s. Fast forward a bit, so then you in 87, you're with Allied Artists, and you're like the CEO and chairman of the board in that like 6-7 year period of time. Who did you kill?
No, that's not accurate.
That's not okay.
No, I got headhunted from CBS to Allied Artists.
Okay.
And I wasn't headhunted as the CEO. I came in as head of productions. I was a vice president of productions, which at that time was a pretty good step forward for me. And so I came in.
That's like not just music. Is that also film or?
No, Okay, that's a confusing part.
Okay.
Allied Artist Records was a separate unit from Allied Artist Pictures.
Uh-huh.
And the two were completely separate units. Although they were merged at the hip a little bit, they were still separate units. I was headhunted to Allied Artist Records, and I became the head of record production at that time. And then as shortly after I got there, well, maybe before, Allied Artist Pictures had run into some financial problems after Cabaret. And even though they made a lot of money on Cabaret, it wasn't enough. Actually, the movie Friendly Persuasion really sunk them. Although it was a huge success, it was financially, they extended themselves far too much. And so they went into bankruptcy, into Chapter 11. And the only Allied artist that was standing was Allied Artist Records. And we were doing very well. We were very successful at that point.
Who were some of your acts around then that we know? The big acts on Allied Artist.
Well, Exodus signed Renegade, and I did all the Louis Cardenas stuff, and I was producing some of that stuff. We did Charmaine. We had a lot of the 80s type acts. And some of the I even though it wasn't my specialties, so to speak, we were a little heavy in the metal area.
Would you seek out acts, or just once they were signed, or did you actually wear like a talent scout part of your job?
Well, anybody that's actually part of the line that we give employees, that we're all A&R, that we're all always looking for a great act. Mm-hmm. And that was one of my frustrations at CBS, is that I was in A&R for a while, and when I wanted to sign an act, whether the act was a great act wasn't always the criteria. The criteria would around whether we were budgeted for it or not. And I lost a very good act just simply because they weren't ready to sign the act to any act at that point.
Okay, so who was it that's you didn't get to sign? That was the one you were disappointed about. It's like Guns N' Roses or something, or
I don't want to because it ended. The truth of the matter is all right, it was the B-52s.
Wow.
Okay. But I gave them to Mo Austin's son, Michael Austin, who was the head of A&R at Warner Brothers. I was frustrated, and we were having lunch, and he was basically telling me, he said, "Hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles. Sometimes you don't get to sign that." And so I said, "What are you doing tonight?" Because they happened to be playing the Troubadour. And he said, "Why?" I said, "Bring a deal memo with you." And so he went and signed them.
Wow.
Definitely a coup for him. So nice. I hope that he bought you bagels from that point on for the rest of his life.
Something.
Yeah, at least if not a bagel,
Would he send acts your way to reciprocate? Like, "Oh, I can't sign this band at Warner Brothers. Maybe you'd like them."
No, because he was Mo Austin. If you're familiar with Mo Austin, he's one of the stalwarts of the industry. Mo Austin is one of the biggest names of all time. I mean, that's all the huge hits from the 60s, 70s, and 80s that went through Warner Brothers, including Frank Sinatra, were all associated with Mo Austin. He was Mo Austin's son. And so he had the power of pen no matter what.
Okay.
And Mo Austin is still like heavily involved in the music industry, and he's like 100 years old, right?
Yeah, he's still with us, and so is Michael.
Okay.
His younger brother unfortunately passed, Kenny, but Michael's still with us and healthy, as far as I know.
So at what point? So you were with Allied Artists. You were headhunted in '87 to Allied Artists. Is that when you?
No, it was earlier than that.
It was earlier.
Okay. But by '87, I was CEO of the combined company.
So you were overseeing not just music anymore, but the other affiliations like soundtracks and what have you.
Yes.
And so
we were big in soundtracks back then.
Okay.
because of the film company. The record division was always the soundtrack section of the portion of the film company.
Any soundtracks of note?
Cabaret.
Well, Cabaret and
Cabaret.
Like that, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
okay.
a pretty big.
That's not a small one, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
not a lot of bigger ones than that for soundtracks, but so over the course of this time, so you've been steering the ship since 1987. So, and now you get to talk to us, and I would say this is probably the cap on your career then.
I've been steering our rudderless ship.
I think it's when he signed Rocky Kramer.
Well, he's the one who
Rocky-
actually found Rocky Kramer, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know.
Yes and no. And let me
Oh.
explain that one. I had worked with Alice Cooper at one time. And during the time I was working with Alice Cooper, his guitarist was a fellow by the name of Mike Panera. Now, Mike Panera had previously been with a band called Blues Image. And while he was with Blues Image, he wrote and sang the song Ride, Captain, Ride.
Captain Ride, right, exactly.
Yeah. And then he left and he went from Blues Image to Iron Butterfly.
Okay, and it got
And
him to
after Iron Butterfly, he went to Alice Cooper, and I met him there. And so I had known Mike for many, many years, and he called me one day and said, "I want to introduce you to a new artist." I was no longer in A&R, and most of my interest had shifted by necessity to the film section, and the music section was being handled by other people. So I said, okay, well, that'd be great, but why don't we get together for dinner? He said, yes. He says, let's do that. He said, but I want you to meet this young artist. I really wasn't interested in meeting any more artists. That flame had sort of at least died down. And so I said, okay, but let's make a date for dinner. And so he and his wife and I got together and we went to dinner at a Houston's. And as we got into the car, he takes a piece of paper out of his pocket and he says, okay, we need to go to this address now. And it was we met Rocky at a Starbucks, not too far from the Houston's. And so I felt at that point that I had an obligation to talk to this young chap.
You got hijacked.
Yeah, you got Shanghai.
Somewhat. And he played me a demo. Mike played me a demo off of his phone, and I listened to this demo in the car for 60 seconds. It sounded good, but I still wasn't all that interested. So I sat down, and Rocky walked up. I met him. Couldn't have been a nicer guy. And so I liked the fact that I was dealing with a really decent, good human being. So Rocky, so I asked him the obligatory questions. I said, okay, so what are your influences? And he says to me right off the bat, he says, well, Queen and Pink Floyd. I said, okay, he's been reading my bio. But he hadn't. He had no clue who I was beforehand.
Oh,
and
really?
So then he was the next thing I know. I met him. I agreed to listen to his music, and I listened to. I really thought his stuff. Then I realized that his music was very Pink Floyd oriented, and it's a concept album. And I heard it before it was anywhere near put together. And so all of a sudden, the juices started flowing again, and I really saw potential in Rocky, and I thought this guy's got a career and a half to go. I mean, he ahead of him. And so then the next thing, I had an act performing with Mike at a Cinco de Mayo concert at a festival, and Rocky came on stage with Mike to just play kind of a guest spot. and so so I was in the wings because my act was there, and I realized that his microphone wasn't working, and literally no one there went to get it to correct it, to bring him a microphone that was working. And I thought, they're kind of sabotaging this guy, and I felt sorry for him because he was working his ass off up there. So I walked over to the sound man. I said, "Give me a microphone." And he had a wireless in front of him, and he said, "Well, who are you?" I said, "Give me a microphone." So,
Who am I? I'll tell you who I am in a minute.
He put on his chairman of the board voice and like, "Give me the microphone."
Well, and so I took the mic and I said, "Make sure this is hot when I get on that stage." So I walked it back to the stage and put it on a mic stand in the wings and took it out and put it in front of him. We actually have a videotape of that. And he started, and then all of a sudden his mic was working. And I was so impressed with Rocky's ability to put up with what was complete garbage. A lot of artists would have just gone nuts with something like that. He just muscled through the whole thing. And then I find out, I still to this day don't know how they did it, but they were part of what he was playing to was actually a playback track. And they had it on a CD, and the engineer from the booth was playing the CD. He was singing live and he was playing guitar live, but the rest was a playback track because the band hadn't learned his music. Which,
oh, wow.
Like Milli Vanilli.
Well, no, because he was actually singing
He was
live.
singing this time. Right.
Yeah.
The
And
band
so-
was, yeah.
The band was faking it.
Mhm.
And so, but somehow they caused, and I literally don't know how they did this. They managed to slow down a CD. So the CD was actually playing slower. And it was bizarre. But when I saw that and I looked at the video back, we had videotaped the whole thing, not because of him, but because of another artist that we had on there. We videotaped it, and they, for some reason, they rolled for Rocky. And I have that video of him, and he just comes through like such a champ. And I said, this is the type of a winner that I want to be involved in.
Kim, can I ask you a big favor? We interviewed him last week, and he's a nice guy. Next time you talk to him, will you pretend you have an idea for his next album? Say, "You've got to make a concept album about Vikings, Rocky. This is the best idea." I just say you made it up yourself. Don't mention us.
Okay.
Do that?
Greg brings this up because we interviewed Rocky last week, and that was what we came up with for his next album, was for him to do it about Vikings. So,
he's a great interview.
He was fun. He was a lot of fun.
He was great.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of humor. His English is perfect, and he's very bright.
Yes,
super nice guy.
I'm curious, just to sidetrack a little bit. So now that you've been the head of Allied Artists for 30 years, where do you see the future of Allied Artists going? Where are you heading? I saw things that you're like really getting immersed in the digital world. Are you planning on creating like your own podcast division that you were planning on asking us to run, or what? Where do you see yourself going?
Well, we're certainly trying, because of the age of the company. We're turning 100. We are looking to improve our appearance so that we don't come across as this old burned out company.
Stodgy.
Stodgy, burned out, and so on. So we're definitely have an eye towards digital, and we're heavily invested in the digital world, and we're trying to mix films with music so that we can have some projects that are movies, but music oriented movies.
Are you going to be producing movies? Or are you going to be putting more films together, or just strictly staying towards the soundtracks?
Me personally, or the company?
The company, yeah.
The company has, we have a number of films in production right now.
Oh, okay. Anything that is on the radar for like a big one?
Well, are you familiar with General Claire Lee Chenault?
The name sounds familiar. I mean,
World War One?
The Flying Tigers, World War II.
I
Oh.
flew on a flying
Oh.
tiger back in high school.
I saw a tiger once at the zoo.
No, I went to high
It
school in the
wasn't flying though.
I went to high school in
Oh.
the Philippines, and when I graduated, I was flying back to the U.S. and actually flew back on a flying tiger.
From the
there
Philippines.
actually was an airline called Flying Tiger at that time.
Yeah.
Oh.
But the Flying Tigers, very, very intriguing story. And just prior to the U.S. entering World War II, Japan was just attacking and just beating the hell out of China. At that time, Chiang Kai-shek was running China, and they were allies. And this fellow who was a captain by the name of Claire Lee Chenault was a stunt pilot, and he could fly P-51s like no one. And he would get, but he was sort of like the Tom Cruise character in Top Gun, in that he would buzz the control tower. He would fly upside down under in military airplanes. He would fly them upside down under bridges and things like that. And he was forever getting into trouble for one thing or another, but
Right.
it was probably one of the best pilots that anybody ever saw. So anyway, he got into trouble, was going to be court-martialed, but he had enough time in that he pulled the plug and retired before they could court-martial him. And so after he leaves the military, he's approached by the Chinese government and asked to come over and be a mercenary from the US and fight on behalf of China and defend Japan from Japan.
Right.
So he does. And he goes, the idea is for him to run the Chinese Air Force, which was, like 3 planes or something. And in fact, there's a scene in the movie that'll probably be the trailer, so I'm not giving anything up, where he's in China, and they're saying we only have 6 planes, and behind him here, and she says, we only have 5 planes.
That sounds like a good action-packed flick. I think
Well,
I like the storyline on it already.
I love it. That sounds good.
Yeah.
But in reality, General Chenault, who wasn't a general then, he goes and recruits a bunch of mercenaries from the U.S. military, which was at that time, the Air Corps, the Army Air Corps, and he brings them to China, and they create a very unique bunch of pilots, and they work with Chinese pilots. They train them. And so you've got the Chinese pilots working together with the American pilots, and they create this elite bunch of pilots that they called themselves. They had painted the front of the P-51s with it was actually a shark jaw in the front, but they called them tigers, and that's how they got the name the Flying Tigers, because they had these jaws in front.
Yeah,
And
very
So
famous.
it wasn't like actual tigers they got taught how to fly.
Yeah. But what they did was, what was very interesting is they, to this day, hold the record. They splashed more Japanese Zeros than more of the enemy planes than any time in history. And they still hold the record to this time.
Wow.
Because General Chenault worked away. The Zeros were faster than P-51s and P-52s, but they couldn't defend against 2 P-51s coming at them from an angle. And he knew that from his aerodynamics training as a stunt pilot. And so 2 of the Flying Tigers could take down any Zero at any time. And they did.
Oh, I got it. Wow.
Sounds like a good movie. It's like the
Sort of
Dirty
like a-
Dozen.
Like a
In the
force
sky.
multiplier thing, because you have the 2, and so then it
Well,
cancels
it's
out
the angle.
advantage.
They couldn't defend against both of them.
Are you
And
going to
so-
demand a cameo in this movie, since you're the head of the studio?
No, but
Like Stan
anyway,
Lee.
the really cool thing about this movie is that first of all, it shows the relationship between the American pilots and the Chinese pilots. And the US Army becomes so frustrated because the Flying Tigers are outshining everyone in the world. And here Chenault is one of their, in their eyes, previously almost disgraced pilots, but he's being held up as this master hero. So he's still in the military reserves because he had retired. And so they reactivated him and drafted all of the American pilots and turned the Flying Tigers into an American unit so they could take credit for the successes.
Wow, that was what I was waiting for, because I was like, I thought that the Flying Tigers, because I remember the iconic, graphics on the planes, and I thought,
Right.
oh, that was an American thing, but it was actually a Chinese thing, and they co-opted it in and made it an American thing.
Well,
They
there
call
were
that cultural appropriation, Brendan.
it was generally being
okay.
run by the Chinese. I mean, it was primarily being run by Americans on behalf of the Chinese as mercenaries. And as the U.S. entered World War II, remember, they're doing this before the U.S. is in World War II. And so when the U.S. enters World War II, that's when they draft Chenault. And and eventually he becomes, they turn him into a general, and that's how he becomes General Claire Lee Chenault, the famous general.
When will we expect this movie to be coming out?
I don't know. We're
okay.
still in pre-production right now.
Okay,
yeah.
got it. But
And
has it been cast already, or is it?
We've got some, but I can't release any information.
Well, it's okay.
on that.
I won't get that
Yeah.
pushy.
But it's gonna have
pushy,
it's gonna have a killer soundtrack, though, right?
Yes.
This seems like a movie that's got a killer soundtrack.
I'm going to make sure of it.
I want to actually get an actual flying tiger in the movie, though, like an actual tiger that they project into space or something.
That wouldn't be historically accurate, Matt.
Yeah, that might be a little off.
But it could be like
40s.
the MGM lion, like that actually could actually, shoot the MGM lion into space. Or...
The Allied artist tiger.
We are. There are a few of the old Flying Tiger planes that still are airworthy, and we will be shooting some of those, some air scenes, and then to use as our base for some of the animated. We don't have enough to actually show all of as many as they had in the air at one time, but we can multiply them electronically.
Well, it sounds good that you guys are moving back into the film industry at Allied Artists, as well as signing on new artists.
We've been distributing all along.
But strictly distribution, not so much production.
Well, we've produced a few things too.
Okay. Well, but I'm saying the distribution was like the bigger arm of it all, or?
Yes, since the 80s.
Okay, fair enough. So for you personally, what is it about what you're doing that drives you every day? Where's the thing that still keeps a flame alive? Because you said earlier your flame had kind of dimmed in terms of dealing with new artists. So what's the current flame that you have where you're going, this is the thing that's exciting for me, this is the thing, as opposed to, again, talking to us, which we understand, but from that point on, what keeps you going to work every day and going, this is exciting?
Well, I'm very excited about Rocky Kramer.
Okay.
And I think that he is the face of music in the future. I think that he brings a new element. He's neoclassical metal, but he definitely hits in that, also in the straight rock area. I mean, he's got a song called "Alcohol" off the current album, off Firestorm, and "Alcohol" is a straightforward, somewhat heavy, but it's a real rockin' song. And his last single that we took to #1 on the global DRT chart, it was a song called "Rockstar." We put together, if you've seen it, he's got a pretty clever music video that is a homage to 80s MTV videos. It's tongue in cheek, and he in there it's a live concert, and everything that you heard of going wrong in the 80s live music occurs in this video. You know, one of the bass player gets shocked by a microphone. He gets stuck on a flying routine. I don't know if you remember when artists like Bon Jovi and so on would come flying across the audience
Right.
in scenes from the 80s. Well, ours gets stuck in the air.
Yeah, I saw the video. I remember his feet like dangling.
That's right. And you see Rocky looking like, what happened to him?
So okay, great. So Rocky Kramer, is he going to have some association with the General Chenault film?
No, I hadn't thought about that, but
Yeah,
I mean,
a
we
little
might be able to
crossover.
use we might certainly use some of his music, because his music would certainly lend itself to a picture of that nature.
Yeah, there's certainly plenty of artists out there who have gone from being big rock stars to working in film. And in terms of, I mean, gosh, so
Trent
many.
Reznor.
Trent Reznor's one, and
Danny
from
Elfman?
Mark Mothersbaugh, and Danny Elfman is one I was
Certainly
thinking of.
Danny
So,
Elfman. I go back to days when I mean, I remember him in Oingo Boingo,
right.
and I remember being at the premiere of the I want to say it was Batman, and I think it was the first thing he did for Warner's, and I was at the premiere, and I didn't even realize he had done the music, and when it premiered in the big Warner Bros. Unit, said, you know, music by Danny Elfman. I said, boy, talk about coming forward.
Yeah.
And he did all, and so, but Danny is just one of the finest music men there is.
You got to see Forbidden Zone, the movie he did in the 70s. Did you ever see that weird black and white movie?
I didn't know about
Look
that.
it up.
Danny Elfman did a movie in the 70s?
Yeah, but when there was the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, before they were a successful band, him and his brother directed it, I believe. And it is the craziest cult movie you've ever seen. Hervé Villechaize is
the director did the music.
His brother directed it. He did the music and acts in it. He's in it. It's a weird little cult movie.
Wait a minute.
You should definitely check it out.
Hervé Villechaize is in it?
Yes.
What's it called?
The Forbidden Zone.
The Forbidden Zone. All right.
It's really good.
I'm Googling that like right after
check
the
that,
show.
see if that's a Netflix.
Yeah.
And that might be free on YouTube. That sounds like a free movie on YouTube.
Yes,
I would YouTube it first.
May well be.
YouTube or on some other random cable channel like Sci-Fi Extras or something like that. Anyway, so I know we've come to near the time that you had allotted for us. We greatly appreciate it. Unfortunately, our client basically got incredibly short shrift today, which was Dead Rockers, Where Are They Now? So unless you've got a few minutes where we want to delve into where it essentially would be rock and roll stars who passed early, where do we see their careers to have come? It's just that you had such a fascinating life that we just got wrapped up in it. So it's like, for example, Andy Gibb, I mean, he was like getting ready to just really, really, really explode whenever he passed. And it's kind of like, where do you think that would have gone to? It would have been a really good segue into this.
Well, I know where that would have gone. And that's that Andy had, a lot of people don't understand. It was very complicated, the relationship between Andy and his brothers. He was very close to Barry. They used to call them the twins, even though they're separated by 10 years in age. But and Barry is much taller than Andy was. But they even look a lot alike, and they had birthmarks in about the same places and so on. So I mean, they really were almost like twins. Otherwise, other than the fact they're separated by 10 years in age. But Andy had, it's not a secret, Andy had a problem with substance abuse, and he had a couple of rounds at Betty Ford, and he had a number of relapses, and part of it was because Stiggy treated him very badly towards the end of his contract with Stigwood. Well, he owed Stigwood a record, but Stigwood wouldn't put it out. And so he couldn't really pursue his career, yet he was stuck by contract there. And because of the substance abuse, he had to file for bankruptcy. And part of the reason for filing bankruptcy was to get out of the Stigwood contract. And he did. Well, he had no contract at that point. He was a free agent. So Robin went to Chris Blackwell at Island Records and said, "Hey, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to, we're going to put together a new album for Andy. We want you to sign him." And Chris Blackwell said, he's got a pretty serious substance abuse problem. He says, "Well, he's past that now. He's been to rehab and so on. And rehab wasn't the catch-all that it is today." And he was and so Robin said, "Wait a second, I'll make you a deal. If you sign Andy to a deal to put out his next album, we will put him in the Bee Gees. He will become the fourth member of the Bee Gees, and we will tour on your album, playing with him." And Chris Blackwell couldn't turn that down. So, I mean, really, Robin did that, which was amazing. And he did that, and that was, but anyhow, so the point that I'm making is that had Andy then, by the way, left and went to Robin's estate in England and to write the album, and he was waiting for Barry to join him there so they could complete writing the songs and start producing the new album. And he died while he was he had the heart problem while he was in England. So he never got a chance to put out that album. And so where he would have gone is, I think that album, he was in a fairly good frame of mind at the time that he went over there. That did change a little bit once he got there, because Barry got tied up in a production and didn't get over there when he expected to. But other than that, and Barry discusses that in a couple of interviews he's done, because he feels bad about it. But had Barry gotten over there and helped him writing the song and released an album on Island Records, which at that time was very hot, and he had gone out and toured with the Bee Gees, I think Andy would have just gone into the stratosphere.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And would he have gone on and solo or with the Bee Gees if he would have been?
Well, I think he would have gone on as the Bee Gees. It would have been a member of the Bee Gees with a solo career. They all had solo careers too.
Yeah. But only Andy's was strictly started on his own and wasn't connected to the Bee Gees in that way. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much for sticking around with this. I know you're an incredibly busy man, and for everybody who doesn't remember, this is Kim Richards, who's the chairman of the board and CEO of Allied Artists International. And before too long, again, he'll be opening up his podcast division, which Greg actually is going to run. The rest of us will.
Yeah.
Greg will just fire us. And
first thing, executive order.
There you go.
I'm sure that's true.
A strongly worded email.
I like it. Well, it's wonderful meeting each of you.
Yeah, well,
Thank you. Yeah,
and there wasn't a whole lot of quibbling, squabbling, or bickering. So that worked out pretty nicely.
Well, we were trying to be respectful, but if we have you on again, we'll tear you down.
Yeah,
or each other. Either way.
That'll happen.
Okay, that'll
normally
work one way or the other.
Right. I mean, the main thing was we were trying to get to know you because you were the last minute replacement for our guest who was.
I'm pitch hitting for the head of our music group.
Greatly appreciate you stepping down into the muck with us. So
yes.
Well,
Thank you so much.
If you have an opportunity, make sure you do interview John, because he has a very illustrious career that he can discuss with you, and he's quite an interview.
Yeah, we would have gone into whole different arenas if I had had the opportunity to just like really like do a full public records check on you and got your social security number and
Cyber stalk him.
exactly,
go.
you know, find out who
Well-
your ex-wives are and talk to them prior to coming on. We could have made it
Well,
really
John
good.
is far more interesting than me, that's for sure.
Well, hopefully he's going to be doing better, because the thing that Matt described at the beginning of the show, I'm going to try to block out of my memory now.
Well, I'm going to check on him as soon as we get done here.
Okay, well, thank
All
you
right, good.
again.
You've left the offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. It's over. It's over. It's time for you to go home. It's over. It's over. Go away now.